I've never walked alone.
Welcome to the Recovering Preacher's Kids, a space for healing, honesty, and leaving a legacy of faith without perfection. We're your hosts, Lisa and Lori, and we're so glad you're here.
In every season you are there. Faithful.
Well, do I have a story for you to start this podcast off?
Okay.
I'm a little embarrassed to tell the story, but like I share all the time, I've just decided if I tell all my things, then Satan can't use them to make me feel guilty or shame. So I'm just going to tell them. And maybe our listeners can solve this problem for me. So I have recently learned, okay, I shouldn't say I've recently learned this about myself. It's pretty obvious that this has been an issue in my life, but I learned something new about myself and this issue in my life. Okay. So let me lay that foundation. But so my husband and I enjoy going to like estate sales and estate auctions and things like that. And so we were recently at an auction, and the way it works is, you know, sometimes you can bid on something and it will be like a set. So say like you win the bid for $5, you get the set for $5, right?
Right.
But then
right.
sometimes it will be something that it's $5 for each thing. So it would be $10 for the set. So I wasn't paying attention. And the reason I was not paying attention was I was overstimulated. And so for people that do they call people like me neurodivergent, or are we just divergent, or whatever it is where our brains work weird? Like,
That's a big word for me.
let me just lay the scene out for you. We're sitting there and I am, you know, it's warm. It's a little warm. And so they had fans going because there's no air conditioning. And I don't know how to say this other than the fans were not on the same tune. Every fan sounded different. And that bugged me. And some were on high, some were on medium, and some were on low. So I had different winds touching me, which was annoying me. And I was processing something that had happened earlier in the day in real time. It was like something had happened and it bothered me. And my brain was just still milling it around. So you had all this happening at one time. Plus you got the auctioneer up there going off. You got people yelling out. So I hope I'm for people that don't get overstimulated, you're probably thinking like that makes no sense. For those of you who get me and understand overstimulation, your skin is probably tingling right now because like I was like at 100. So anyway, Shane wins a bid for $5 and he comes walking up to me with two candlesticks. And I said, was it $5 for one or $5 for two? And he's like, I think it was $5 for two. So he yells out, is this five for, you know, whatever he was supposed to say. And somebody, part of the auction, yelled back aggressively, or I took it aggressively, and I lost my Fruit Loops. I'm like yelling and I'm like, I'm just asking a question. There's no reason to be like that. I am not the one. I am not the two. Today is not the day. I'm just like snapping. And Shane's like, do you need to go outside? I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. They just need to quit being like this. And it went on. And some friends of ours were with us, and one of them said, here we go. She knew, like, she better start popping some popcorn because Lori is about to act a fool. And I'm like, they are making me mad. And anyway, so yesterday, I was thinking about this, and I was like, you know, when somebody's world is falling apart, they think people that know me are like, I need to call Lori. I need to talk to Lori, you know, because she's going, like, I'm your chick when your world is falling apart. I can point you to Christ. We can pray about it. We can search the scriptures together. We can do all those things. But at the same time, that same person also knows, given the right set of circumstance, I am just a match waiting for a spark to ignite me. And so it got me thinking about legacy and what we leave behind. And I don't think we should be doormats, but I do realize that I'm irrational in moments of overstimulation. And I guess the question I have is, as a believer in Christ, how do we carry the faithful follower and the burn rown to the ground in the same heart? I don't think there's an answer to it. I think it's a journey and it's a process, but I hope I'm not the only person that reacts that way. I hope somebody listening, you are not an aggressive personality. You are not a burn the roan to the ground kind of person.
Not to your extent of what you're talking about. However, I can get to that point and can be a little aggressive in what I say and how I say it to people when I finally have enough. But then I beat myself over the things that I've said and the way I have said it. And there's sometimes I say things that come out that I didn't mean anything by it. For example, one day or something, John, we were doing something, but I was busy and he called my name or said something. And all I said was, "What?" But I said it in a very not so nice tune, kind of like you're irritating me type tone. But really, I just was saying the word. Of course, he was
Yeah.
being funny and he goes, "Don't what me," in that tone of voice. But he was joking with me. But I mean, in a way, it's like what you were saying. You realize, well, wait a minute, that's not even what I meant. I was just like so absorbed in what I was doing because I had so much going on in the situation that when I heard the noise over here, I just, because I'm somewhat just keep it to the point, short. We don't draw things out, we don't add fluff. And so I don't know. I mean, that makes me feel nice that you don't think I'm an aggressive person because sometimes I feel like I am
No,
in
I will
things.
cut your tires.
Okay, I'm
I
not
will
that
cut
to
your
that point.
I will cut your tires and then drive you to the tire place and help you pick out new ones.
If Lauren's listening, she might say, "That's where Amelia gets it from."
Do you know what I'm beginning to realize though is like there is a part of me, if I'm just going to be completely honest, I don't dislike that side of me. Because when that girl shows up, I feel, I dare I say, powerful. I feel in charge. I feel like
Seen?
nothing, I feel seen, like nothing can stop me. And that is where my conviction has come in. And I know that that is not how God created me to be because that is putting myself above God. That is, I'm saying, God, you can't even control this. You can't even control me. So you ain't going to control this situation. So therefore I will act and sometimes I feel bad and afterwards and sometimes I don't. I'm like, well, they shouldn't have provoked me, which that's a podcast for another day. But, you know, uh, I think about Peter and I think about the night that Jesus was arrested and that joker went from, cutting off a soldier's ear to denying Christ all in the same night. And so I think maybe me and Peter have a lot in common. Maybe we can hang
Parallel
out in
do.
glory together. But I don't know how to carry those two people. And I don't, I realize it's because I've never allowed God access to that part of my life. And I think I've never allowed him access because I like her.
That's an interesting point.
So what else is in my life that I like, which isn't that AKA an idol, that I don't allow God access to? Because what if he changes that part of me into something that what if I don't like? Or what if he changes and softens that side of me and then that side of me doesn't exist anymore? And that goes back to because that's an idol in my life. Like we think of idols as only being these physical things that we can touch and feel and see. But I'm thinking it goes deeper than that,
Yeah.
even down to our attitude, the way we handle things, anything
while
we
you were
don't give over.
talking, it made me really think too that I don't know. I have a tendency to beat myself up over characteristics. Well, I'm not about myself, that I'm not more, let's just say, meek or humble or quiet or whatever. All these ideas of what maybe the world says the Christian's supposed to look like, and maybe even sometimes other Christians say we're supposed to be like, I beat myself up over not being like that. And however, when you're talking about you haven't let God in on that area because you're afraid he might change it, what about the idea that he put that in you for a reason, okay? As far as your fire, I guess let's just call it your fire. But
I
he
like
just needs
that.
he's just wanting you to allow him to mold it in the right direction, in the right way, because just like Peter, he needs Peters in our world today who don't have a problem saying what they're thinking. And I don't want to say maybe cause a show, but in some ways cause a show to wake some people up. However, he does want you to do it. He wants to be able to work in that area so that the show is in the right manner. Does that make sense what
Well,
I'm
let me tell
saying?
you. Oh, you're hitting the nail on the head because I'm gonna tell you the way I act, the Lord cannot use that. He is not present in it, and he cannot use it. However, he can take the story of it and do something good with it. But I would like to, I'm always wondering why I do things the way I do or handle things the way I handle. I'm always dissecting myself, not so much in a beat myself up kind of way, but for some reason, I want to know why I tick the way I tick, why I think this way. It's probably a problem that we should break out in therapy about, but often wonder if it's because the generation ahead of me, I feel like didn't stand up for themselves. They allowed people to mistreat them or through my eyes growing up, I felt like the generation ahead of me didn't stand up for themselves. And I can remember being young and thinking, I'm not going to let anybody treat me that way. Okay. So then, and I'm not saying that was the reality of it. For all I know, the adults in my life were handling things like they should behind closed doors, not publicly, But I'm just saying, as a child, that was my perception.
Yeah.
And so then I look at the generation behind me who they have seen me and others, because I'm sorry, that I ain't the only one that acts
No,
out.
you're
There's
not.
got to be other
No.
people acting out. But I think the generation behind me has seen my generation, because technically I have displaced emotions. Because honestly, I wasn't really frustrated with the auction people. I was overstimulated by all the different noises and feels. But truthfully, I was upset about something that had happened earlier in the day. So technically, I was taking out my feelings on someone else. And so there's a generation that has seen me do that and others do that. So now this generation, they don't process. They just say it in the moment, and we're just appalled that, why is there all this confrontation? Like, you need to think on it for a couple of days before you say something about it. So it's just got me thinking about all the things that we pass down and that we hand down, good and bad, that I think that we don't think about. We're so focused on all the big things that I think these little things that just go from one generation to the next, that's just kind of overlooked. It's just like the pea under the mattress, the princess that
Yeah.
had the pea under the mattress, and it's just this little thing, and it just kind of, it festers and it grows over time.
Yeah, because I've seen it in myself and then, listening to my children. Sometimes it cracks me up. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm so proud of you because y'all are not like your mother who just stands there and is quiet. And then there's times I see you're acting like your mother, and I'm like, can you just choose your words more wisely? Or did you not think about what you just said? How did that person take that? And lots of times I hear, well, I don't care. They shouldn't have said X, Y, and Z. And I'm sitting there going, but then sometimes they don't sit and stew over like we do,
Mhm.
like you've thought about it. I don't know because I mean, it's a really hard and we have no answers here, and I'm trying to dissect how or put together how what I'm thinking here because, and scripture in Deuteronomy, the Shema says, you're to talk about these things and basically pass down from generation to generation his commands and his decrees while you're doing life. But how I've done life has not passed down the right ways, which is basically what you're getting at. So now how do we reel that in? Except I guess it's just to speak up and come back and say, hey, look, I demonstrated the wrong behavior and God has convicted me on it. And this is how he is working on me about it. And I want to share so you undo what I've demonstrated for you. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think too it's more of the living it out. Well,
Yeah.
and the first step for me, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. It's an old movie called Superstar. It is the dumbest movie. It's got Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon. It is so
So it's
stupid.
right there.
Don't watch it. But anyway, in the movie, she gets mad at her aunt and she like opens up her bedroom door. Or she storms up to her room and she slams the door and then she opens it and she's like, "You're horrible." And then she shuts it and slams it. And then she opens it back up and she's like, "You're horrible." And then she slams it and then she's like, "Horrible." And she does it over and over and over. And I was thinking about that movie because I was like, that's how I am with God. Because I'm like, why are you not fixing this part of my life? And then I slam the door and I don't let him in. And then I open it back up and I'm like, did you hear me? And then I slam the door. And then I open the door. And God's just like, I'm just waiting on you, just and and so I think the first step for me is opening the door and stop shutting it and letting God have that part of my life. But then that opens up the conversation for me too about like what does that logistically look like? And I think the first step for me, I think, is when I'm overstimulated to walk away. Again, I do believe we have to stand up for ourselves. I'm not talking about being a doormat and taking abuse. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about acting a fool because the fans are not on the same tune and I feel different wind and I'm just acting out to act out. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope I'm making sense of the difference. I
Yeah.
think there
Yeah.
is a time that you
There
stand your
is.
ground because God does not want us to be mistreated and abused and taken advantage of. I think the thing for me is I don't handle it in a godly way. If I laid it out like that, that's my whole thing. I do not handle conflict in a Christ centered way. So
So
therefore,
maybe that's his whole lesson that he's trying to start with, not because I sometimes take it, well, if I'm not supposed to stand up and have conflict, which I don't handle conflict well either, but we're afraid to allow him to show us, well, this is the way we do it. There are going to be times you need to be forceful, but this is the way we're going to do it. Does that make sense?
yes,
Maybe that's what, but we're afraid. I don't know. Maybe some of mine is not so much as change. I'm kind of just afraid and ashamed of, well, what is he going to find when I open the door?
ooh,
I'm just one of these, like, it's like keep everything behind a closed door so you don't really know. I can keep the facade on, but, in reality, I mean, people still know me, you know,
true.
but
It's interesting that we work so hard to hide things from God, the creator of the universe who created us and knows all things. We work very hard to hide things from him.
so maybe the short answer is one, we just are willing to let him, you take it to him and let him, you start working on it with us. And then two, just being honest with other people and like, well, I didn't handle that well. When we come back, I don't
True.
like to go back and say, well, I didn't handle that very well. I'm sorry. I could have handled it better, but I didn't, and then I don't know. I lost my number 3.
Like on what is it? Home Alone, where Buzz is like, for 3 reasons. One, and then he's like, C. He goes from numbers to letters. Sorry.
Yeah. So
Rabbit
I just
hole.
I got sidetracked there. I just lost my
That's
train of
okay.
thought. But I mean, I don't know if that's just the bottom line is that I don't know. I have this idea that just because I'm a Christ follower, I'm supposed to have it all together.
Yeah.
So therefore, when I do act like what you're describing, I beat myself up over it and I just try to make myself small instead of allowing it to be a teaching moment. I don't know, because I guess
Yeah.
maybe I'm more of a perfectionist. I think I'm supposed to do it all right the first time. I don't know. And I don't know if it has to do with we're constantly hearing, well, you're a Christian. You're not supposed to act that way. Well, I'm also human,
Right.
but we don't need to use that as an excuse, but let it, I don't know. Why can't they be teaching moments and let him use it to, I don't know, used it for today's podcast for everybody to get a laugh. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's
The
what,
truth is that we have reached a point of Christianity to where, think about way back, they lived in the villages and they were small and everybody was a part of everybody's life. And then we got away from that here in America. And then now we have social media. Like, we literally know what's happening in China or across the world at any given moment. Like, we have all this information about all these faraway places that we're so focused on, but we still are not taking time to really do life with the people closest to us. And I think that's because I'm only going to let people get so close to me because I don't want you seeing all the dark things. I don't want you seeing the things that I'm working on. I don't want you, well, I mean, I'll let people see anything, but I'm weird. But there are still things that I don't let people touch, and I'm realizing I don't let God touch those things either. And so we're so consumed, I think, with doing everything on our own and being so independent that, like you were saying, we don't even in the moment say, well, I handled that poorly. I
yeah,
didn't do that right, you know, because it's just like natural reaction to just cover it all up.
yeah. And pretend like it didn't happen.
Yeah. When obviously it just did. You acted out. It was a given. I don't know. Again, I don't, the true answer, and it's not the Sunday school answer, but the true answer is we have parts of our lives. And maybe for me, it's acting out. Maybe for someone else, it's the tone they use in words, or for somebody else, maybe it's curse words, or somebody else, it's the way they treat other people. Like, we all have our thing, but the true answer is that we have to allow Christ to touch those parts of our life. But that's where we have to let go of control. I think that's where it all goes back to, is we can't control it. You have to. I heard someone say recently that we don't have if in our flesh we are practicing self-control, we are lying to ourselves. That self-control is a fruit of the Spirit and it can only come from Christ. So every time we think that we are acting in self-control, we are lying to ourselves. And so that's been pondering around in my mind too, is I think part of my problem is I'm constantly trying to practice self-control in my own strength.
All right, y'all, that's a wrap for today's episode. If something in this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or just made you feel seen, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them. Send it to a friend, drop it in a group chat, or post it on your story. That kind of support means the world to us. You always find every episode, updates, and more over at therecoveringpreacherskids.com. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'll see you next time.